edge, some tile,
Yellow edge, huh?
Yeah, got
Nice.
a long-tailed bass, which was nice. Those are always fun when they come up.
Right.
What else? Some other groupers like scams, things like that.
Right.
Yeah, roast porgies.
Are you targeting when you're doing that?
Not really.
Not really, right?
No.
It's just, yeah.
No.
Just like luck of the draw, right?
Kind of. I mean, to say targeting, it's kind of a misnomer because most people think targeting, they're thinking a specific species. Where
Right.
I'm targeting a certain depth of the water.
Right.
Right. So if I'm looking for, demersal species that are on the bottom, I'm going to keep my jig within, 20, 30 feet of the bottom. Whereas if I'm targeting something like when I was in Panama a couple of weeks ago and there's yellowfin marking under the boat,
Mm-hmm.
I'll drop down, let's say we're marking them at 80 feet.
Right.
I'll drop down 100 and rip through that whole area.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you're kind of in that strike zone. It's kind of just about efficiency. If you're looking for a specific fish in a specific area,
Mm-hmm.
then that's where you want to hit them.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So yellow edge, yeah, those yellow edge are nice.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're my favorite grouper by far.
Really?
Yeah. Yellow edge and snowy definitely are my favorites in terms of eating wise. They're
Yeah.
you can't beat it.
You're like the grouper master, right? I'm gonna say that for you. You're gonna try to stay humble when I say that, but that's the
I've
truth.
caught a few.
Caught a few.
Yeah.
One of the things too, we could probably get into this later too, is I want to talk to you about some of the regulations and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And get your opinion on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of regs that are coming out that I think are especially for gag grouper that are coming down the pipe that are not going to be good for the rec angler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of them kind of are better for like the pro angler, right? But at the rec angler,
It's not.
It's going to be tougher.
It's going to be a lot tougher. I think they're going to have dramatically shorter seasons for
Really?
gags. Yeah.
Yeah.
If not close them all together in certain areas.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, listen. Thank you very much for joining me today on Memorial Day weekend.
Absolutely.
Or Memorial Day. So I really appreciate you coming in. I know we talked about, hey, do we want to reschedule this because we were like, oh wait, it's Memorial Day. Do we really want to do this on Memorial Day? But Nick and Yanni, solid for coming in today. Carlene, understandably, is not at the bar today. She's with her family, rightfully so. We're here with Benny Ortiz on the Connected by Water podcast, powered by Joey Cardi, Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, and fueled by our good friends at Papa's Pilar Rum, who remind you never to be a spectator. And we are drinking the sherry cask today, so
Cheers.
yeah, cheers. A couple things I want to bring up before we really, really get rolling. Number one, you have a seminar coming up in Tampa.
Yeah, I've actually got two coming up in that Tampa area. I've got one on next Sunday, the 5th. That's going to be at Tampa Fishing Outfitters and actually in Tampa.
Okay.
Then on the 6th, I'm going to be up in Crystal River at Sodium. So there's going to
Okay,
be,
cool.
They haven't advertised that one yet, but it's coming out pretty soon. So
When
I'm
is
gonna
that
be
going to?
doing-
You don't know when yet?
It's going to be on the 6th, that Monday, and it's probably going to be about 6, 7 o'clock at night at Sodium in Crystal River.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah, so I've got two.
We air this in our platforms a week from today, but we do go live on our platform. So whoever's
All right,
watching
cool.
live today can be able to get wind of that one. Do you have any other things coming up on the schedule like that?
No seminars or anything like that,
Yeah.
but I'll be out there fishing.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what do you go through in these seminars?
Usually in the seminars, I try to do it as a foundational thing, right? Because
Mhm.
a lot of people, slow pitch is still fairly new, and that's kind of my specialty, if you will, is slow
Right.
pitch jigging. So I go through, the rod, the reel, the tackle, all the whys behind it, because a lot of times folks see the stuff and they just don't understand why it's set up the way it is or why things are the way they are.
Mhm.
And I feel like when you explain the why behind it, give them a little bit of the history and why it works this way, a lot of lights kind of go off in people's heads, like, oh, that makes sense. How am I catching a 50-pound black grouper on 30-pound braid? Most people just conceptually don't get that.
Right.
But once you walk them through it, then, oh, that makes sense. I
Yeah.
can do that.
Very cool. The
Mhm.
other thing I want to bring up before we really get rolling is also another mention about our new starbrite program and what we're doing there. Once again, we have teamed up and partnered. Connected by Water has with Starbrite Solutions and Corey Redwine. At C Redwine, at starbright_com is at Instagram, and also at Connected by Water, at Dennis Friel Art. You could tag any of those social medias in your post when you post about somebody cleaning up their coastline or the beach or doing good. Hashtag do gooder is our hashtags because we're looking for do gooders doing really good things on the coastline. And we are going to announce a winner every week. We are also going to post up about this for our big announcement on it. you will win this bucket of starbrite solutions. Got the degreaser and the reggae sponge, and we got the boat wash and all the good things. The salt off
stuff's
all
great.
good stuff, right?
Yeah.
All eco-friendly products too. And that's really the whole point of it, is the eco-friendly aspect of it. Please follow at Sea Redwine, Quarry Redwine, and Starbrite to see all the wonderful things that they have going on. We couldn't be more excited about this program. And again, we need your nominations. We need you to nominate the do-gooders in your local area, and we will be rolling out the awards for this very soon. Once we start getting a bunch of nominees to analyze the brand new program. So we're just starting to roll it out now. So we're going to be posting up about it, and I hope everyone gets involved in it. We're really excited about the program. Conservation is a big deal here at Connected by Water, and I'm sure it is for you as well.
It's huge.
And pretty much everyone we bring on here is like-minded in that aspect, that we can't do enough good. And one of the mindsets that we want everyone to have is there's no goal for this. It's basically changing a mindset and changing a lifestyle and changing the way we as human beings operate in relation to our clean water aspect, our clean coastline aspects, and not saying, okay, we cleaned up that beach, our goal has been reached, high five everyone. It's about changing the way you think, really, and that's really what we're all about. So, Benny,
yes,
master angler, and some would say slow pitch jig pioneer.
I've heard that before once or twice. Yeah,
I'm sure you have, because it's true.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about before coming on the show, saying it really exploded into this big thing. Like we even had we had Tom and Trista from Hooker Electric on here on the previous episode, and I told him that you were coming on, and Tom was like, I just started doing it and I got addicted to it. So tell me, what is it about it that's really causing it to explode?
I think there's a couple things that are causing it to explode. Probably three things. I think number one, just it's so fun, right? It's just there's nothing like getting a strike on a jig. You're just everything's just so smooth and perfect, and all of a sudden just minutes of violence happens, right?
Right.
That's number one. Number two is that it's really the only new thing in fishing that's out there right now. If you go to ICAST, everyone throws around the term game changer and all that. You see it every single year. For the most part, it's not. There's a bunch of good stuff that comes out for sure, but there's nothing actually new in fishing that really comes out until this slow pitch happened a couple of years ago. So I think that is another reason. And I think the third reason is just like, people are inquisitive. They see this happening out there, like, oh, let me kind of look into it a little bit more. Let me try to get on board. The barriers to entry aren't too bad anymore. You can still, you can get a reasonably priced setup now, whereas before, when I started doing this, you were ordering things blind from Japan. So there's a lot more out there, and it's kind of just growing that ecosystem. It's like having a CVS across from a Walgreens, and both of them do really well. It's like having all of that stuff out in these tackle stores now is just kind of growing that momentum. So now you're finally seeing it catch on. So it's like, thousands of people are out there doing it now. Whereas, back when I started, it was like 5.
It is like thousands. That's a big thing that one of the big reasons I wanted to bring you on is because you are someone that can really educate the crowd, not only on methods and techniques, and, obviously you can, but also the history of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned Japan, and I was hoping you'd be able to talk about that as well.
Sure. So the whole technique started in Japan. It started by, it was originally founded by this guy named Norihito Sato, right? And what was going on in Japan is they had a very high pressure fishery. They don't have the regulations necessarily that we have for species. So a lot of stuff was getting fished out. But they also have a very unique fishery insofar as the Japanese islands are, essentially a volcanic archipelago, really. So it goes into very deep water very quickly over there. So they were targeting a lot of fish in very deep water. They had to figure out an efficient way to get down to those fish, and also to target these fish that were super high pressured.
Right.
So what they did was really scale down the tackle, and just kind of in the way that really only the Japanese culture can do, hyperthink the situation, right? To the point where they think, all right, well, do we even need hooks? That's something as basic as that, and then build up from there an entire system that is designed to work together, from literally the hooks, the leader, the assist cord, the line to line connections, the micro guides that are on the rods, the types of rods, the recoil on them, the way that the rods are laid out. All that stuff was just hyper thought. And it was very specifically tailored to that Japanese fishery. So this is probably, let's say, 15, 20 years ago, right? So, big companies like Shimano, one of my sponsors, they got into it fairly early, but they were kind of into their own thing with the butterfly jigging, right? And that's how I got introduced to jigging here in the United States. So about 10, 12 years ago, I got my butterfly jigging set up, the jigs, and they were in grams. I had no idea, the conversion from grams to freedom units, and just having no idea.
I'm horrible with that stuff. I always tell people I went to art school, man. I don't know.
And now I'm like, I'm pick up a jig blind. I'm like, oh, it's about 350-ish, in grams. When we first started kind of figuring out what was going on, we tried to mirror what was happening in Japan, because obviously if they were the pioneers of the technique, they know what's going on. But what we didn't realize is we really had to tailor that to this fishery here in the United States.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, it's even though it's of similar kind of,
it's a similar concept.
Yeah, similar water temps and everything like that in certain areas, but similar concept. But it's a lot
fishery. Different. Yeah, you're fishing here, for instance, in South Florida, a lot of times you're fishing over heavy structure. You've got big angry grouper down there, big angry snapper down there that are going to rock you up, amberjacks, things like that. Whereas over there, they're not necessarily structure based. It's they're kind of out there in the deep water, and there might be a rock or something, but it's not like fishing a wreck necessarily like it is here. So yeah, it was a very expensive game of trial and error, really, from the beginning. Because a lot of the sites, and this is now Google, you can translate a whole page, from Japanese to English, and it's relatively coherent, but back then you really couldn't. So it was just looking online, trying to find the limited amount of videos that were out there. Most of the stuff was in Japanese. It was very difficult to find information. So we kind of took the bare bones information that we could find and just started applying it over here. And when we took their, exactly what they were using over there, started using over here, we started hooking up with fish, but we really got our asses handed to us a lot of times. So we realized, all right, something's off. We got to tweak some things. That's where we went a little bit heavier with our line to try to find the balance point between strength and thinness, and we can go into that stuff in a little bit.
Sure.
But just getting it dialed for this particular fishery took probably 2 or 3 years before I got it to the point where I was like, all right, this is what we need here.
Okay.
Right. And then after that, it kind of branched out where people are now, now they're using like micro electric reels. There's, people are using ultra thin diameter lines, down to like 10-pound test and, 1,000 feet of water.
I thought that was the significant thing about Tom telling me that he just fell in love with it because it's Mr. Electric Reel, right? He's used to going brrr, and there
a little push button fishing.
But he's like, no, man, I'm fishing. This is great. He said he was having a blast. He was addicted to it.
Yeah, they have these new reels out right now. They're this big. They're like tiny little reels that are not much bigger than a regular conventional reel that are electric reels. So they have plenty of capacity. They have all the drag you could ever want, and you can fish all day long, jigging that reel just like a regular conventional reel, and then when you're done, hit the button, come on up.
Wow.
Personally, I'm not an electric reel guy.
That's not you.
I think I think there's something sporting about actually actively reeling the fish up.
Right.
I kind of think of slow pitch jigging as like the archery of fishing.
Gotcha.
It's like you're not using bait. You have these little tiny hooks. You've got light line, and it's pure skill, out there. Whereas bait, you can throw down whatever, hit a slab of something, and fish will come along and get it.
Yeah, jigging is definitely a different animal.
Much different.
And even another different animal too. If I can liken it to another kind of method, would be if you're like rooster fishing in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
And you get the poppers, and you just like cross the water, just like nonstop. It's like, man, after a while, you're just like, dude, I gotta stop this. But jigging, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Same thing. Take me to the difference between the slow pitch, though.
All right, so slow pitch to speed jigging, the differences. All right, so speed jigging is what you're trying to do is you're trying to mimic an injured bait fish that's fleeing away, something that's like scared and running. So oftentimes that'll attract more of your pelagic fish or your fish like amberjacks, the jack family, that are into chasing things, right?
Right.
Occasionally you'll get snappers, things like that, but in my seminars I joke about, like, you're doing it right if you feel like you're gonna have a stroke, right? Because you're going really fast.
Right.
A lot of folks don't do the math on it. If you actually take, the one handle crank and how far that is in terms of retrieve, you're not really moving the jig all that fast in the water. You think you are, but max you're going like 7 or 8 miles an hour. Okay. So it's not that quick, but you're trying to rip that jig through the water column, and usually you're going from the bottom all the way up, 3/4 all the way to the top of the water column. With slow pitch jigging, it's a little bit different because you are trying to mimic a wounded or injured bait fish that's kind of on its last legs, right? So you're focusing not necessarily on the retrieve of the jig with like speed jigging. You're focusing on the fall of the jig. So what'll happen is, I have a couple of different examples of slow pitch jigs here. You have jigs that are long and skinny like this, and you have jigs that are short and fat like this one. And they all have different falling patterns in the water.
Are you seeing those in the frame? Yeah. All right. Cool. I just want to make sure that people can.
I'll kind of hold them up for some folks if they want to take a look. But really keying into the different shapes of jigs and how they fall in the water is going to be dictated by the conditions of the day, right? So whether you have a lot of current, a lot of wind, if you're in deep water, shallow water, the type of action that you want to get on the jig itself, how you're going to actually pitch the jig, you're all just mimicking that wounded, dying bait fish. So it's just an easy meal for predators to come get. So if you want to target fish that are in the bottom portion of the water column, real close to the bottom, always count your handle turns, so if I have my reel and one handle turn is about 3 feet, I'm always counting my full revolutions, even if I'm only going in halves or thirds or whatever. That way I know exactly where my jig is in the water. Whereas if I'm coming, I know if I'm dropping down, sometimes I'll use metered line if I'm targeting fish that are suspended in the water column. That's really the difference. And really, for the angler, the difference is the taxation on the body. Really, right. it's and that's really one of the reasons why I started slow pitch in the beginning, was because it's so hard to speed jig in South Florida summer heat. Right. I mean, it's just like, it's just kills you, you know, when you're out there on the water. It's hard enough being out there in 95 degrees with 100% humidity. Yeah, now you're basically sprinting with your arms, right? and you.
Well, even if like you're in a tournament, for example, and you got full spread out, there's always every now and then you're like, drop one down, start jigging, and it's like, you do it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
We just did all this, and we just loaded the boat. We're like out here, we got all this whole spread out. You want me to jig? I'm sorry, that's you.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that's really cool about slow pitch, is that you don't have to kill your body to do it. When you're using the tackle correctly, because it's all so specifically designed, it doesn't tax you that much as an angler. You can do it all day long. And from everything from the hookup to landing the fish is just so much more relaxed.
Right.
You're not fighting the fish in the traditional way where it's that lift and pump, and you're gonna beat that fish and break its will. It's more of a, oh, come on up, buddy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of examples. It's like you have the dog walking around here, sweet dog, right?
Yeah.
But if the dog sees a squirrel running across the street, he might want to go get it.
Yeah,
right?
she's gonna fire.
She'll go up there and get it. Same thing with the fish with slow pitch. It's like, it's this kind of docile fish just hanging out, but it sees this fluttering thing. Its instincts are going to go and strike it. But just like that dog, if it goes and tries to go after that squirrel, if you pull back on that leash really hard on that dog, it's going to fight harder because it's going to want to go. But if you kind of gently walk it around, it's going to go with you a lot easier. The same thing with the fish on the way up. After that initial, couple runs down, most of the time the way up is actually really, really calm and smooth, because you're not fighting that fish, and it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't realize that it's, going up, to the boat, but it sure seems like it. And it comes a lot more cooperative.
Yeah.
To come up. Yeah.
You think that could be a bladder thing too?
Well, it depends on the fish, right? So if you have a fish like a grouper or a snapper where they're going to get barotrauma and they're going to blow up a little bit, that'll happen, once they get off the bottom.
Right.
But other fish like even tuna, that you catch them mid-water column, sometimes, even in the bottom. We've caught tuna on the bottom in 900 during the day.
Wow.
And that's another thing too that's really cool about this, kind of as an aside, is that we've realized that the traditional ways of catching fish in Florida, specifically, fish aren't where people think they are a lot of the time.
Right.
And we've found them on jigs in different areas. Like
Well, that's what's good. In jigging, sometimes you'll get a king.
Yeah.
In those tournaments, if you only drop it halfway down the column.
Yeah. You know, well, for instance, if you want to talk about kingfish, about what, month and a half ago, 2 months ago.
I don't really want to talk about
no,
that's cool.
It's all good. No, but we're off of Palm Beach. We were kind of messing around for mutton snapper in like 140 feet, and I just got blasted by something off the bottom. You know, just rocketed offshore. Turned out to be a almost 60-pound kingfish, and landed it on a jig, and people were just like, minds were blown. They're like, "I've never seen a kingfish that big," and they were like, "It looks so relaxed when you were just kind of slowly winding them in."
Yeah,
you know, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool. You brought some rod setups over there.
I did. Yeah,
you want to take those out here?
Sure. Yeah, let me take. Be right back.
Yeah. We're cash here, man. You see some of these lures. You know, the cool thing about these lures, man, it's like, they're little works of art. They're like modern art, though. Like, you never see these jigs. They're like, if you look at like, yeah, exactly. If you look at like a traditional like American lure, like a Rappler or something like that, it's like those are like classic works of art. You know what I mean? But if you look at these, they're just like Calders, like the Mobiles or something like that. They're like little works of art.
It's really cool. Yeah, I mean,
it's heavy.
Yeah, this one's a 300 grams, so that's about 10 ounces, give or take. And this is kind of on the mid size, I guess you could say. I've fished jigs up to 500-600 grams.
Oh wow!
Depending on how deep we are.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah. So we brought over a couple of setups. This is kind of my general all around setup here. This is a Shimano OSHA Jigger 2000. This is kind of a jack of all trades reel. On this, I have 20-pound Power Pro, so not particularly heavy line, and then I have it to a 50-pound leader here. And I shortened the leader just so you could kind of see this knot. Yeah, this fluoro leader.
Okay.
You can see that knot that I have there. That's called a PR knot.
That's called pretty.
Yeah, right.
That's what PR stands for. Yeah. That's a good job on that one.
Yeah.
Nice.
So this is part of the reason for this knot here is because you can see the guides are really small.
Yeah.
And these aren't even the smallest of the guides that you'll see on slow pitch type rods. This is a game type Slow J by Shimano, the medium version. But in order to get through these guides, you need to make sure that you have a very slim line-to-line connection. So you can't use really bulky knots. You know, a lot of times people are like, I like to use uni. It's not going to work so good. And also, this is 100% connection if you tie it correctly. So you have, you retain all of your braking strength between your braid and, your fluorocarbon leader. So most of the time, if you're going to brake, if you get hooked up on the bottom or something like that, because that happens occasionally, you'll lose it at the knot here as opposed to losing the whole leader up front. I have this one set up here to a two hook rig on top, and generally speaking, you'll have 2 hooks on the top, 2 hooks on the bottom for most setups, and these are 3/0 Gamakatsu hooks. And kind of the unique part about these is you'll see is the barb is on the outside of these hooks. You see that right there? The barb is on the outside. The reason why the barb is on the outside of these is because when the jig's kind of doing its thing in the water, sometimes it'll flip and it'll catch your leader. By having the barb on the outside, it slides off right there. So it doesn't get caught and it doesn't foul up your jig. So you have a less fouls on your jig that way, but still retaining the actual, catching power of the barb on the outside. And you use these little tiny hooks and just kind of, for instance,
so that barb on the outside is just as effective as a hook in the lip. Yeah,
just as effective. Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed no difference in terms of hookups. Sometimes when I use a deeper water setup, I'll go to single larger hooks, usually like a 6/0. I'll use kind of and just have one on top, one on the bottom, just to have a little bit less moving parts down there. But for the most part, this is the setup that I run. I run to my terminal connection here is a 50-pound fluoro. Sometimes I'll use 60-pound fluoro to a swivel, a ball bearing swivel on top. These are Spros. Use a split ring to connect to my hooks, and then the split ring is what I'll use to connect my jig. So my hooks are always independently swinging of the jig. The reason why that is, and the reason why you don't want to tie directly to the jig here, you don't want to give any kind of advantage to the fish where they can kind of pry out the jig by moving their head.
Right.
By having that independently, the jig can do its own thing up here, but you're going to have pretty much a direct connection to your line, irrespective of where that jig is all the time. So it's going to keep a nice connection. Now with the smaller hooks, though, a lot of times people see these types of hooks and they're like, what kind of fish can you catch with them? On these particular hooks, I've caught 70-pound AJs, I've caught 50-pound black groupers. A lot of people don't think that these types of hooks would be able to handle fish like that, but by having multiple hooks on there, what you're doing is you're dissipating the weight, so not any one individual hook is bearing the full brunt of the fish.
So do you find most of the times both hooks are engaged?
Yeah, most of the time what'll happen is you'll have, because you'll have hooks on the bottom of the jig and hooks on the top of the jig.
Okay.
Right? And that's a major difference between this and speed jigging. Speed jigging, you usually run one hook on the top. Now, by having the two hooks, usually you'll get a strike and the fish will get one set in the mouth, and then by shaking, the other ones will kind of wrap in, so you really have a very secure hook set connection on the fish. But the reason why you have them on both sides is because fish generally attack from the head first.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. They don't know if this is the head of the fish or this is the head of the fish, but all they do know is that most of the time in the water, fish aren't going backwards.
Yeah, directionally speaking.
Right, directionally speaking. So if the jig is happen to go in the water this way, they'll attack from this side, and this way they'll attack from this side, and that's why you have the both sets on there.
Don't mean to interrupt you. We are going to take this call real quick. This is Mike Myatt from Papa's Pilar Rum.
All right.
Mr. Mike.
Dennis Friel.
How you doing, sir?
My brother.
How you doing?
Well, man.
You watching the show?
I am watching the show.
Say hello to Benny. Yeah. Benny's good, huh?
You know what? Benny is a freaking legend.
Yeah.
You know what? I used to throw lead, and I could never, like with my spaghetti arms, not like your like lumberjack arms, that you could just sit there and jig and jig and jig and jig and jig. But I want to tell you is that Georgie Pavaramo, freaking Harry, all those guys said you're the master. I watched all your YouTube stuff, dude. You are seriously freaking master of your craft. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Well, Mike, we only bring on the best of the best on this show, and Benny absolutely fits that bill.
Well, he does. He does. So happy Memorial Day to you guys, and to everyone that gave all and never came home. I give my blessings, and to all their families, my heartfelt prayers and thanks. But couldn't let a Memorial Day go by without giving you a shout out, Danny.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mike.
You're the best, bro.
Yeah, you too, man. And I'm glad you brought that up about the real reason for Memorial Day, because I actually wanted to mention that at the beginning of the episode, and I failed to. So I'm happy you're catching me on my mistake. So thank you so much for that.
No, it's not a mistake. You know what it is this Veterans Day, this Memorial Day, and I happen to have a younger brother that was a member of Recon that did time in Colombia and Panama, and 3 tours in the sandbox. And he reminded me today that it wasn't about him. It was about his brothers that he couldn't bring home.
Right.
And, that's a very sobering thought, because freedom's not free.
Nope.
I mean, it's not free, and I've never served, but I am patriotic. I don't care what political party people are involved in, but when it comes to days like today, fly the flag, thank your lucky blessings, and have the jig master on.
That's it.
Get much better.
That's it. We want to say thanks to those guys who laid down their lives, by keeping moving forward, and that's what they probably would have wanted.
Exactly. You know what? They didn't do it. They didn't do it for nothing. They did it for everything.
100%.
So, what are you guys doing? Having any pups flour?
We got the sherry cast today.
Yeah, we did.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
Nice.
Yes, we are. That's why I said to Benny, I said, yeah, you like rum? He goes, that's my drink. What are you talking about?
So, Benny,
yes, sir.
Talk to me about your lures a little bit. I mean, when I first started deep jigging, or, slow jigging, or whatever the phrase is, it was all about, like, the Shimano stuff.
Yeah.
What are you using now for lures?
So I'm using lures from a lot of companies, including Shimano. Actually, Shimano has a lot of really good offerings in the slow pitch realm. They've got one that's out in the market right now. This is the one I'm holding up. It's called the Shimmerfall. I've caught a lot of great fish on this one. It's kind of a longer, more slender jig designed to get down fast. Hopefully, we're going to have some more weights coming out in this one. And then this one here is called the Wingfall. This one has the scale boost on it, which is like a scale pattern, which is kind of cool. So it actually mimics a bait fish. This is a little bit wider, fatter. You've got a whole bunch of different offerings that are out there. And really, the cool part about it is that you can really dial in your lures now to the exact conditions of the day. So long as you know how that lure is going to perform in the water, you have a lot of really repeatable action on these lures, and you can dictate what you're going to use in what particular circumstance based on, I know that this lure, whether I fish it in a 210 gram or 100 gram, it's going to react the exact same way in the water. And I'm just going to kind of extrapolate what I'm going to use based on, all right, how deep am I? How's the current going? And then I'm going to kind of get it dialed into the action that the fish are really keyed into that day.
We were down at Tropic Star Lodge a couple of years ago and did some deep jigging. And I had my jigging machine, Adrian Gray from IGFA with me, who is, the guy's a machine. The guy, he will cast poppers 1,000 times a day. Then he'll deep jig for 2 hours in a row. And
yeah, he's an animal.
Mm-hmm.
He's an animal. He's probably the best all-around fisherman ever met, outside of Robert Collins and maybe Larry Dahlberg. I mean, he's in that class. Adrian is that good. But speed jigging, he brought up these amberjacks that were just like, no, thank you. I'm like, no. He brought up a broomtail grouper, and he wanted to get my picture with it so bad. He goes, "Do it, Maya, do it. Hold it." That thing hit me in the head. It was like, down goes Frazier. He really was. Down goes Frazier. But anyway, Benny, you're an inspiration, and a lot of people that don't think they can do it, they can do it. I mean,
absolutely.
Not everybody has spaghetti arms like me, but not everyone has like tree trunks like you. but you know what? You're getting it done. You're bringing it to everybody, and it's very appreciated. And from the team at Papa's Pilar, and we love Denny and his whole team to pieces. So come on, guys.
Thanks, right, Mike. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.
That's really kind words.
Thank
you.
You too.
All right. Take
Talk
care.
to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Man,
Mike's the man.
Getting a shout out by the band.
Yeah, Mike's the man. No, listen, I love being part of the Papa's Pilar family.
Yeah, make a great
really
product.
It's a great fraternity to be involved in. It really, really is.
Well, I've been supporting them from the sidelines for years now.
We'll have to get you on the field. Definitely. No, I mean, listen, Mike's the man. He loves calling in on the show, and I always pick up for him when he does.
Yeah, he brought up George Poveromo and Captain Harry. I mean, that was kind of one of the first times after I did some seminars down at Captain Harry's. I guess Harry told George, he's like, "Look, you got to fish with this guy. They say he can fish. Let's bring him out there. So let's do a bait versus jigs thing." And I will humbly say that I smoked them, and that really changed George's mind a lot when he saw kind of the effectiveness of it and really having it done by someone who really knows what's going on. He was like, "Oh, this makes a lot of sense." And I was explaining everything to him. He was asking all the right questions. We had just a great day out there. It was a lot of fun.
That's great. I'll have to bring you if you want to come back on. I'd love to bring you on with George. George's a regular on the show.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, he's been on the show
George
a dozen times. Yeah, he comes on all the time. I'd love hanging out with him. He's such a great guy.
Yeah,
such a great guy. So we cut you off here when you were talking about directional aspects of these lures.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit about the different types of lures. So you have, I'll have a couple of different types of lures here. So we've got one here from Sea Falcon. We've got one here. Sea Falcon's a Japanese company. Shimano, obviously, both Japanese companies here. So they're kind of the pioneers of really getting the stuff dialed in. And these are all original jig designs, which I think is really important. One of the things that you see with jig designs often is, most of the jigs get made in factories in Weihai, China. That's just really where most of the stuff happens. Sometimes companies will have, different.
Not to be confused with Wuhan, China.
Not to be confused with Wuhan, Weihai, the economic district where almost all of the fishing tackle is produced.
Okay.
All right. So over there, they'll have these, different companies will come up with these different designs, and if they don't pay enough money to these companies, they will basically sell the mold. For these jigs and slap a different color paint on it, charge a little bit less money. But the jigs that I brought here today are all original design jigs, which I think is super important because that's going to really support the people who are leading the way in terms of innovation.
You mean original design, like hand designed?
Like, yeah, like they'll
Okay.
hand design these jigs. You know, what they'll do is they'll mold out of clay, get an
Okay.
idea. Sometimes they'll do 3D renderings of them, you know, and then actually bring them out into the water to fish them, deal with different types of coatings, you know, in terms of, you know, the type of finishes that they put on the jigs in terms of make them more durable, the different types of glows that they put on the jigs, the different types of paints. Some of the paints are infused with UV. You know, like for instance, like this black jig here, this is by Jig Pro. You know, this jig actually, when he was working on this jig, he asked, you know, what color should I make? I was like, you need a black jig. I
Right.
was like, you need a black jig, but it has to reflect UV light. So what they did is they put some UV, you know, into the paint.
Interesting.
So if you hit a UV light on this thing, this whole thing will actually light up even though it's black.
Wow.
And this is probably one of the better producers in terms of
So
colors.
is that kind of almost would relate to like a theory of bioluminescence?
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Nice.
I mean, I've talked about this before, and it's very bro science because I don't have any empirical data to
Sure.
support it other than
I like pro science better than real science.
other than
for
being
sure.
on the
It's
water
understandable,
and the
right?
shit works, right? So what I've found is that it's not necessarily the glow that makes fish hit jigs. What I have found is that if a jig reflects UV light, if you can flash a UV light on it and it actually kind of lights up on there, not just the glow part, but the actual jig itself. So like oranges, whites, if it has UV in there, the black will even do it. For whatever reason, fish tend to key in on those more than jigs that don't do that.
So I mean, with the whole Roy G. Biv aspect of it, right, and the light and then losing the colors, and the violet is like the last one, right? I guess that kind of makes sense though, because if you're gonna already cut to the chase and make it glow, then it's probably going to get lost,
right?
And be pointless by the time it gets down to where it's
right.
going. Right.
One step further than that is that, you know, a lot of the colors that we see up here, and this is what you brought up, what we see in our visible light spectrum here above the water is going to be drastically different than what you see at 100 feet, 200, 300, and then you get down to 500 plus where it's basically pitch black, right? So there's something else that's going on. Those fish still have eyes. Golden tilefish have eyes, right? And it's not because there's an abundance of light down there. They have to be keying in on something else. And the only thing that will go through, you mentioned Roy G. Biv, that's the visible light spectrum, but one step beyond that is the ultraviolet spectrum, right? And the ultraviolet spectrum does penetrate deeper in the water. And I think that is part of the reason why these fish will see these things and actually, because there's no scent, you know, there's no scent. There is a certain amount of the lateral lines will key into the movement in the water, you know, and I've seen videos where people will drop down for tiles or snowies and, you know, the lead hits the bottom and all these fish kind of congregate right there. But something's got to get them to go after
bite,
right? And I think that UV is that little extra oomph that if it's the deciding factor, that's what I would go with.
Yeah, it might be real.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. You know, I always think too about the deep water fish. And we say, okay, you lose the light, you lose the color. Okay, it's, you know, but I always kind of liken it to like if you're in a dark room and you open your eyes, eventually your eyes are going to adjust. You're adjusting. How must that be for those fish that are always down there?
Yeah, just
all the time.
permadark.
Right? Yeah, it's to permadark for us.
Yeah.
But to them, they could probably see just like it's
that's normal
because they've adjusted for so long that way.
Yeah, and then you have other fish that, you know, I mentioned before.
That's bro science, right?
Yeah, there it is. You know, other fish that I mentioned before, like tuna, you know, where most of the time they're up in the, you know, upper water, mid water column, and so there's plenty of visible light. But you'll find them, you know, we caught maybe a month ago, we caught a blackfin, probably 25-pound blackfin, literally on the bottom fishing for tiles. Thing peeled off line. We're like, oh, this is a monster tile. And then it kept peeling off line. We're like, this is not a tile. You know, and it comes up and it's got all these, you know, it had a hatchet fish. It had all these little black fish in its belly. Yeah. And this thing's been down there like sword ground deep on the bottom.
If you think about it, though, man, I never really thought about it that way. And this is as someone who paints fish for a living, right? The tuna eye is very different than most fish, and it's almost more like swordy,
right?
Kind of the way the eye is structured. I mean, it's not like as bally as that, but you know what I mean. But it's got that wide pupil.
Yep, all the way up and down the water column, all day long.
But it can't be like but it comes up and down too. So it's got to be versatile. It could be why that eye is shaped the way it is.
Might be.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Right.
Wow.
So
we're breaking new ground on the bro science book here today.
Right. So going back to the tackle here that I have, I mentioned that I had 20-pound Power Pro on here. So a lot of people, when you tell them that you're fishing 20-pound line and you're fishing for a large grouper, they're like, what is going on in your head? You're not, you know. what I say to that is there's a couple things. First of all, you need to know where your line is going to fail, right? In terms of a straight pull.
If the 20-pound braid
so you have
is
20 so 20-pound braid is
Yeah.
just what it's listed at. That's the minimum that it's going to break at.
Right.
Most of the time, including this like 20-pound Power Pro here, is going to break at like, we've tested extensively, usually between 39 and 42 pounds in a straight pull, right? Well, people are like, well, I want abrasion resistance. Okay, well, I get that, but how does braid break? It breaks because there's a little nick in it or hits something and there's a nick in it under tension and it just pops like that. If your braid is already in the structure, you've lost the fight. All right, that's what I always tell people. That's why you have a 10. I shortened this one up, but usually you have a 10, 15 foot leader on here that gives you a little bit of wiggle room for your abrasion resistance, and that's what I have fluoro on
the fluoro, yeah.
So and then you're using a 50-pound line on that, which is decent enough. But also with the jigging is that
you ever go stronger than 50?
Yeah, sometimes I will. I'll go 60 sometimes if I'm fishing, like particularly in the Gulf. If I know I'm going to be in an area where there's a lot of gag grouper,
the monsters.
Yeah. I'll bump it up to 60. When I was in Panama, when we were like Cubera fishing, I actually went up to 80.
Wow.
So it was So and usually people don't fish 80 on there.
The teeth ever give you issues?
The teeth. You know what?
They were more to the front.
They're more to the front, with those big dog fangs that they have on them. Yeah. But if you're looking at a toothy thing like a barracuda or a king or a wahoo, that thing's like a scissor. It's going to cut through anything, irrespective of what you put down there. Right. So the way I look at it is, if on like a king or a wahoo, if my hook happens to land in the right spot, cool. Let's rock and roll with it, right? But if it doesn't, that's the cost of doing business. I'm fishing for the bite first, everything else secondary. So once I hook up with a fish, I'll do everything I can to get that fish to the boat. But sometimes you're not going to be able to.
Right.
That's just how it goes. But with a line in that straight pull, this reel here is going to put out about 23, 24 pounds of drag on its best day, right? And if this line breaks at 39 to 42 pounds in a straight pull, I can have this thing locked. And a lot of people don't realize how hard 23 pounds of drag is to hold. That's a lot of drag that's on there. You can really fish that lighter line and be able to land these larger fish at higher drag settings than you would think usually. And also, you really don't have to play necessarily with that game of setting your drag to a quarter of your breaking strength of your line. If you had 20-pound line, you'd set it to 5 pounds of drag or something like that. You don't really have to, because you got this really parabolic rod that's going to absorb a lot of the shock, and you've got your leader on there that'll also absorb some of the shock. So you don't necessarily have to worry about that popping off,
right?
With your
and
braid.
It's not as if you're really just, once you get it to the side of the boat, just pulling it up.
No, you're not. Yeah, you're not
gonna
exactly.
Net it.
Yeah, net it up, gaff it, and sometimes you can flip a smaller fish, but I wouldn't recommend it too much unless you really know what you're doing.
Not like those guys. The video you see those guys going like that.
Jeez, that's man.
What's that all about?
There's some things you can do for YouTube views, and so how strong your product is, and there's other just being reasonable about it. But one of the reasons why you're using this diameter braid is because one of the central things for slow pitch is you want to stay as vertical as possible in the water. So you want to have as least water influence on your line as possible. So the smaller diameter, the better you're going to be able to stay up and down, right? So the deeper I go, generally speaking, the thinner diameter I'll fish. So if I'm in 200 feet of water, 300 feet of water, I'll use a 30-pound braid to a 50 or 60-pound leader. Whereas if I'm in 600, 700, 800 feet of water, I'll bump it down to a 20-pound or 15-pound braid, because that water influence that's on there. I mean, think of it. If this was the regular line and you actually wove it into like a square, right?
Right.
That if you put that in the water, how much that current would affect that square of line? It's the same exact thing. It's just exactly. Yeah. It's the same exact surface area, just in a straight line. So you're going to get all that water influence on it for 900 feet of water. And that's a lot. So it's kind of like a sail that's down there, and it's actually being affected. So if you want to drop down and you want to be as straight up and down as possible, you want to have the thinnest, strongest line that you can possibly have. So that's why I'll drop down to that 20-pound.
Is that the reason for the narrower spool too?
The narrow spool is actually just for line lay, right? Okay. So it does a couple of things. So if you can see kind of where my thumb kind of fits directly here on the spool.
Yeah.
So most of the time I'll either control the spool with my index finger underneath here or my thumb up here. On these Oshas, it's kind of cool because it's really all one-hand operation.
Yes, you have to worry about too much of the back and forth.
I don't have to worry about the line lay going back and forth too much, especially when I'm jigging, because sometimes it'll bunch up on the sides, but with the narrow spool, it kind of reduces that. And then with a reel like this, it's got the auto engage, so I can just click it and I'm in. I'm completely a one-hand operation right here, whereas a lot of other reels that are on the market right now, they don't have that auto engage feature on them. So it's kind of a two-hand. You always, you're dropping, and then sometimes the jig will stop halfway down, and let me fumble around with it. Whereas this, I have two hands on at all times.
Tight.
Boom, bang, I'm in and I'm playing. And especially when I'm down on the bottom, I'm checking bottom all the time. So it's down, up, all the time. So that's a really beneficial feature of this. But the thinner spool on them really does help with that line life. So this one here, this has got about 600 yards of 20 pound on it. If I bump it up to 30, I can get 500 yards on it. And then if I go into real deep water, let me grab this guy.
Okay, take
over here. This is kind of my heavy setup.
Okay.
So this is what I'll use in, where I was out in like 900 feet of water yesterday. I was using, this is an OSHA 4000. So I said this one holds 600 yards of 20. This one holds 1350 of 20 pound.
Wow.
So
wherever you want to go.
Wherever you want to fish.
Yeah, right.
But this rod here, whereas this one is rated up to about 330 grams. So you see that's actually a good point. Let me bring that up. So you're looking at these virtually identical looking, right? Whereas if you have a rod, in traditional fishing, you're looking at, heavy, you're looking at a heavy rod versus a light rod. Usually they'll have different diameters. One will be obviously heavier than the other. With slow pitch jigging, you're really just using the rod as a tool to impart an action on the jig.
Yeah.
You're not fighting the fish with the rod necessarily. I mean, sure, you are putting a certain amount of heat on it, but really you're using this just to move the jig. So you're matching your rod to the jig weight that you're going to be using. So this one's rated up to 500 grams, whereas this one's rated up to 330 grams. So if I'm fishing lighter jigs, I'll go with this one. If I'm fishing heavier jigs, I'll go with this one. Now, one step further than that, and this is kind of more into the advanced techniques, is let's say I'm fishing and I notice that the fish are keyed into certain movements, right? They're keyed into something that's maybe faster sliding action.
Okay.
Right? I know that this rod is going to produce a very slow, deliberate action, very slow fall of the jig within its weight range, right? But if I take a rod that's rated for heavier jigs, right? So if I use this, let's say this one's 210 grams. If I use this on this rod, it'll be a very slow, easy action. If I put it onto this one, because it's a stiffer rod in terms of recoil, it's going to be what we call punchier.
Yeah.
So it's going to actually spring out a lot more because this is going to have more recoil. So I'm purposely underloading the rod, and I'm going to get a different action out of the jig. And I can do it in reverse too. So this one's rated to 330 grams. Well, what happens if I put a 340 gram or 350 gram jig or a 400 gram jig on there? Well, I'm going to slow it down even more. So now I can manipulate my jigs based on the action that I want and the type of jig that I want, and really dial into what those fish are keyed into. A lot of folks are, I get the question, what do you think makes a good jig fisherman? Personally, I think that knowing how your jigs fall in the water, every single one of them in your bag, or even 5 select jigs in your bag, that's going to be the difference. That's going to be the key difference between someone who's going to be very successful on the water and someone who's going to have an okay day on the water. Is really knowing, all right, I know what these are going to do, and I know how I can manipulate that to get the fish to do what I want them to do.
Listen,
you're shaking your head.
No. Well, I'm shaking my head because right. We always say this is a fishing show that's not about fishing, right? But every now and then you got to bring someone on to break it down, and this has been incredibly, not only educational, but astonishing to me and just amazing because, first of all, thank you for sharing as much information on all this as you are to not only me and us but our entire audience that's going to be watching this. But I always am just amazed by finding out new things. But even just taking it as deep as you take it, I always go in the back of my head going like. Does the fish know that it's you? It's like you got them figured out.
There's 2 things that I want to say. The first thing is a lot of times in fishing, and I think I've seen this kind of across the board in fishing, is that it's very secretive in terms of folks don't want to share information,
Right.
because they want to have some type of leg up. Like tournament fishing, where are the fish at? What techniques are you using? Are you using kites? Are you using whatever? With this type of fishing, personally, I hate the idea of secrecy or not telling people really what's going to work. And I think a lot of folks that I've talked to, because I try to answer as many questions and be as objective as I can with folks along the way, is just to get the right information out there to them. Because I realize there's people aren't going to be as obsessed with this as I am. They're just not going to be. I have a special level of OCD with this, where
it's true in a lot of ways, and also you're a professional fisherman,
right?
Most of the people that are listening to this are not.
Yeah.
Right, they're just going to be guys that want to go out and try it.
Right.
So what could be the harm?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's that part of it, and I've always wanted since the beginning is just progress it. Just one of my buddies actually told me recently, kind of the difference in where I am with the fishing is that I just never stopped. I never stopped. I was always out there fishing. I was always answering the questions. I was always doing those things, and the fruits of that labor kind of paid off indirectly. I wasn't looking for it, but I've gotten to the point now, very fortunately, and I'm very thankful for being able to be that person and that resource for folks that are out there, and to give them that information, maybe give it to them in a way that they've never really thought about it before, because I do really think about this, and the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours on the water that I've spent doing it have really helped me hone this particular craft. So I feel fortunate,
you should
to be able to do that.
Yeah, you should. And you listen, you're the perfect person to bring on this show, because we always say we like bringing on our guests are people that make a living at following their passion. Yeah. Right. And doing whether it be fishing or surfing. Most of the guys we bring on are fishermen.
Yeah.
Right. But whether it just be making a life or making a living of being connected by water. Right. And that's really the whole thing. So I always am enthralled bringing on guys that are just following their heart. We chose a lifestyle. Yeah. Right. We not chose to be millionaires. Not to say that there haven't been millionaires across the table for me, but it's just like, even with what I do, like we're just following passion, following heart, doing it because you love it, and that's what keeps you going every day. I mean, that's what brings me in on Memorial Day. I didn't work today, but I come in to talk to you because I'm stoked to talk to you, and I'm like, I want to get into it with you. You know what I mean? Because it really comes down to, we're all connected by water and living a life that's connected by water, and what does that mean to you?
Right.
And I wanted to kind of ask you that, maybe get a little bit underneath it. Like, what drives you? You talk about the OCD, right? And you talk about, you just don't stop. And it's like, why is that?
Why is that?
Might be a tough question to answer. It might cause for some self-reflection there. Maybe a little bit more rum.
Yeah, right. Let's see. There's a couple of reasons, I think. I've done a little bit of that kind of reflection before. So, getting into the personal stuff for me, and might as well, right? So when I was a kid, my mom and dad got divorced when I was real young, about 2. Only saw my father twice in my life. Saw him when I was 8. Saw him when I was 21. And that was it. Never anywhere around. My stepdad, he came along and he was always treating me as his own. And I had, so many opportunities as a result of him, and it was fantastic. The weird thing though, is that any person that I ever met, because I have the same name as my father, they're like, oh, Benny Ortiz, your father was Benny Ortiz, right?
Yeah.
Every single person that I've met said that your father was the best fisherman that I'd ever seen. He guided in Alaska. He was, a big freshwater guy, fished a lot of trout and brooks and stuff like that. And I don't know if it's like some weird epigenetic thing where like kind of just went through the genes and I got into the fishing bug, or if it's some crazy deep-seated thing, but I don't know. I have this connection to it that I can't really explain with anything else, in terms of just being on the water where you're disconnected from everything. It's very meditative for me. I can just dive into something that was alien and figure it out.
Primal.
And and just be that, essentially that apex predator out there, and try to be the best version of me that I could possibly be out there. And the only thing holding me back from doing that would be me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of went down that rabbit hole. I think that was really it. There was other guys that, when we started jigging here in the US, there was a group of probably 5 or 6 of us that really got into it early on, and everybody kind of went their own ways. Some of them are still doing it, and I kind of went this way with it. But for whatever reason, it just always drew me in. It just always drew me in because I grew up in New York. I grew up in brooks and streams and ponds and bass and trout up in the Catskills.
Okay.
So I grew up in a little town called Wurtsboro. It has one traffic light that we probably don't even need. And I never really fished.
Pompano's Finest behind us, huh?
Got a little.
Who's that? We could they can cut this out.
All right.
What's that? Purple van. Purple
van got it settled.
So up in the Catskills?
No, it didn't. Yeah, I grew up in the Catskills. So right where I grew up is this place called Roscoe, where there's a really huge fly fishing area. A lot of folks go out there and fly fish. Where I grew up
Did you grow up fly fishing?
No. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I can't. I'm too deep
love
in
fly
this,
fishing.
man.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, I don't know if you can fit anything else in here.
I got enough going on in my life. My wife will kill me. But it's getting down here. I moved down to Florida about 15 years ago, and that's really when I got into the saltwater.
Okay.
And just kind of went off the deep end with it.
Yeah.
I started, just as a way of getting away from my day job. I didn't have any email on the boat. I didn't have anybody calling me on the boat. Right. And, I was doing a lot of head boat fishing and kind of got that figured out, and then just branched out from there and met a couple of the right people along the way. So it's a little bit of skill, a little bit of luck, just like anything. And
that's interesting to get beneath that a little bit with you and just, I always this is the first time we're ever speaking.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I think it's important to mention that for context in the show. And I love meeting people for the first time on the show because you could really get when you have a good first talk with something, sometimes that's nothing's better,
Yeah.
And it's so cool. But I find it really interesting when you say you saw him at 8 and you saw him at 21, but then to find out that he was really a great fisherman.
Yeah.
That's really extremely interesting to me.
Yeah.
But how does that affect you? When you saw him again when you're older.
Yeah. So
did you guys talk about that?
Yeah. Here's the no. Here's the messed up part. So the time that I saw him when I was 21 was at his mother's funeral.
Oh man.
Yeah. And I was there, and the strange part is, I stayed really close with his brothers. He had 3 brothers, and in particular, my uncle Mark, who he married me. He's probably one of my best friends in the entire world. I love him to death, and I was standing there. It was me, my mom, and my uncle Mark. We were standing there, and he just walked right past me. Didn't even say hello.
Really?
Yeah. It was pretty.
That's when you start you open up your Instagram account. Look at this motherfucker.
Yeah, right. I guess so, but it was more of I'm with you. No, I got you. And it does. There's no bother to me. It's like one of those things where when if you've ever read an obituary of a stranger in a newspaper and it doesn't affect you at all.
Gotcha.
It's like that.
Okay.
Right. It's just
that's a good perspective to have on it.
It's just he's a stranger. He's a DNA donor.
Gotcha.
And I have whatever in my appearance and whatever's inside is from there. But there was no real external influence in it, which is strange. And then to have this one random thing of all the things I've done in my life that happens to be exactly what he did and at a level that he was at or beyond. And I don't know. I don't know if that's some weird in my brain therapy type situation.
I don't know, man,
but whatever. It's just that's how it manifested, and it came out here once I got to Florida. In particular, as I said, I got here about 15 years ago. And just really just felt this connection to being on the ocean and being, figuring this out, being able to be the best version of a fisherman that I could possibly be.
Yeah.
Turned out okay, I think.
That's great, man. No, that's really, that makes you, man. That's really interesting to find all that out.
Yeah.
I want to bring up too, the guy who originally turned me on to you was Mike Lipsky.
Oh, nice.
Right, over at Real Deal Bait and Tackle. Yeah. And I know that he was one of the first shops to really be on the forefront.
Yeah.
And I want to give him a shout out and be on the forefront of the slow pitch jig phenomenon, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike he started his shop Real Deal a couple of years ago, let's say 4 years ago, I think it was about, and he had a little tiny shop off Commercial.
The commercial shop.
Yeah, he started out and he barely had any stock, and he just hustled, and he was a super nice guy. Everything about what he was doing, I thought he was doing the right way, and I went in there, we talked a little bit. He asked me some questions about jigs. So, he had this whole catalog of jigs that he had access to. And he was like, what should I get? And I kind of went down the list. I was like, this is what you need, this. And he went and he managed to do it. And he took that chance because he saw that this was kind of a budding industry, a niche market. And of course, I would say most, probably 70-80% of his business still is the bait fisherman, the tournament fisherman, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's pompano.
Yeah.
But he has the best jig selection outside of my house, I would say, anywhere in the United States.
Yeah.
He took it to a level where he's got, he opened up the new shop, which is it's a beautiful shop. He's got that whole room in the back, that jig room in the back where, you turn off the lights and the UV glows and everything's glowing in there and it looks like a disco. And it's really cool. And it's awesome what he's done in terms of being able to be that place here domestically, that what we were looking for in Japan when we first started this, because what we were doing is we would look online. There was a shop in Japan called Amberjack. We would buy things online or from other shops, sometimes through folks that were actually in Japan that spoke English, that would act as kind of like a third party go-between these shops. And the problem was you could never get your hands on the stuff. So you never knew what was actually going to come in the mail. So you didn't know, and also, by the way, the shipping is calculated by weight. So you're sending lead across the Pacific is literally the most expensive thing that you could ship. So, it was, like I said, in the beginning, this was a very expensive game of trial and error. And by having a shop like Mike's here in Pompano, I can go down the street and go, all right, this is here's some stuff, or send somebody over there and know that he has the stock of stuff there where people can actually go there and make an informed decision. And he's not trying to sell you on one thing or another. He's just trying to get you the right information, just kind of like what I'm trying to do, get you the right information so you can make the best choice for yourself when you go out there.
I thought it was interesting to bring him up because from what I saw, all this stuff unfolding in front of us, and we always say we like to think we bring on the best of the best in the topics that we discuss on the show, and certainly. But, what I saw was, I don't think slow pitch jigging would really be as big here or such a thing here if it wasn't for the two of you guys.
100%. I think that we both have definitely had an influence in it. I think there's some other folks as well that probably.
I'm sure there's others.
There's others, but I think in terms of accessibility, here in the United States, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And I want to mention that on the show, not even just to say thanks or float your boat or anything like that, but just to make it clear to the audience listening, that's who we're talking to today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that really is important. Another thing, you recently posted up about, obviously you're catching lots of fish, right? And I hope you're prepared to talk about this part too with the way you prep a fish before it goes in the cooler. Because I really wanted to make sure we found time to talk about that today. Right. So, and I know we're kind of, going through a lot of information and a lot of stuff. I think a lot of people that are watching this show are probably watching it with a notepad and a pen. Right?
I hope so.
Because there's a lot of information for them to kind of remember and take down, or maybe we're going to have to stop and pause or rewind a lot of the things that you said. But here's another thing that we want to bring up. Right?
Yeah. So
you're also an expert on prepping a fish before it goes in the cooler on the boat.
Right. So
give me reasons why and your techniques, if you wouldn't mind.
All right. So first, let's talk about the technique, and then, or talk about a little bit of the background of it, and then we'll kind of explain it.
Let me just get a black fan with you.
Got a couple of tools. No, I got a couple of tools here that I'll show you, in terms of what we use and how we do it. So again, going back to the idea of the Japanese overthinking things. The process of how I process fish at the end is called ikejime. So ikejime. So it's spelled IKE space JIME. Ikejime.
Okay.
So there's ikejime and then shinkejime, but they're two separate things. But for the overall, let's just call it ikejime, just for general purposes. So the reason why this is important is because, let's take a step back. So in Japan, they figured out essentially how to transport fish, how to process fish at landing them, to process it to processing the fish for transportation, so that a chef in northern Japan is very familiar with fish that are landed in southern Japan and all over the place. They don't necessarily care, what it is that's the biggest. They just want to know that it's the best and the best quality that's coming out. One of the things here in the United States that's a problem is that we have one of the most diverse fisheries in the world, right? In terms of from freshwater to saltwater, from the Pacific all the way down here to the Gulf to New England. Why does our seafood product suck when it comes to market? And the reason why is how those fish are processed, generally speaking. And the reason why that is because of the pressures that are on the commercial fishery. So you have a situation in the commercial fishery where they're being bombarded by, honestly, a lot of Asian imports, right, from farmed fish, either there or sometimes there's some farmed fish. Like a big push right now is farmed cobia from Costa Rica, things like that.
And obviously the foreign mahi.
Right. Yeah. The foreign mahi, a lot of from Brazil or from wherever that are coming in here. And that forces pressure on the commercial fishermen here. It forces their prices down. So in order to make the amount of living that they were making before, they have to catch more fish, right? But what if the difference was to those commercial fishermen is that I can get you 3 to 4 or 5 times or even more per pound for the fish that you're catching. So you can catch less fish and make the same amount of money if you process them a certain way. And then it opens up the possibilities of better shipping those fish, so that a chef in New York knows what a mutton snapper is, or a lingcod from California. And you can get those there and get the best version of those possible. And that all starts with how it's processed on the deck. So from landing a fish, the traditional way that people do it, they land the fish, somebody gaffs it, they throw it in the box, they hear it slapping around on the ice for a while, and then they keep fishing, right? Because they want to be on the meat and they want to, keep killing everything that's out there. And I get it. But if you're able to process those fish and take a couple of minutes after you land that fish to process it in a better way, it's going to yield an immensely better product. And that process is through ikejime. So what happens is once I land a fish, generally speaking, I have this here, which is a spike, right? It kind of looks like an ice pick.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so you take a look at it.
So that's about what, 6 inches there?
Yeah, about
inches?
6 inches total. I'd say that with a handle. So the actual metal part, let's say about 3 or 4 inches on there. And what you do with that upon landing the fish is you quickly brain spike the fish. Okay. So what that does is, what you'll do is you'll feel along in between the eyes of the fish. Sometimes there's like a little soft spot or a flat ridge in there. And usually that's where you're going to insert this in there. It's not, I'll be just brutally honest with it. It's graphic. You're spiking a fish in its brain, and when you spike,
we have no problem with that on the show.
All right, great.
Yeah,
so
we're good.
All right. So what you're doing, you're essentially putting the spike into the fish's brain so that it instantly has brain death, right? And what you're going to notice when you put that into the cranial cavity is the dorsal fin will flex, and that's how you know you've actually hit the right spot. Okay. So that the fish is dead. So what that does is it doesn't suffocate the fish. There's no more. The fish doesn't have to suffocate in a box in the dark and ice. It's dead. That's it. Right. Brain death. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to take
the oxygenation deplete the meat.
We'll get there in a sec. Okay. So all right. So the next thing you do, you take your knife. I have a knife here. Actually, I should have washed it. It was used a lot yesterday. What I'll do with this is I will cut, and I like to use a knife that has actually a pretty good backbone on it.
Okay.
You don't want to have a real flimsy knife. I'll use this to cut through the gill rakes on the fish.
Okay.
And what that'll do is it'll sever the artery that...
When you cut through them, how are you cutting through them?
There's 2 ways that you can do it. The one way is actually, if the gill rake is on a crescent like this, you can cut horizontally through them all, and that'll sever the artery that's in there. Or you can cut that membrane that's right behind it that kind of leads in. You can cut that, and that'll also bleed out the fish.
Okay.
So what you do is you have a bucket of ambient temperature water. So what I mean by ambient is basically just a bucket of seawater that the fish were living in. You cut that gill rake on there, and the artery bleeds. Now, you've already spiked the fish in the brain, so it's dead, right? But the cells don't know it's dead yet. The brain is dead. So you take that fish, you have the arteries and the gills that are cut, you put it into that water. And the reason why that water is important is because it stops the coagulation of the blood, so it actually all comes out. at that point. So it's head down in the bucket, bleeds out in there. Once that's done, then the third step of the process happens. And that's, you can do it one of two ways. You can either go through the hole that you've made in the head from the spike into the spinal cord itself, and you use something like this. There's this is called a circuit breaker from, that's just the name that they gave it with AFCO. This is one of the versions.
So AFCO makes this?
They make them.
Specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is through the Ikejime Federation, which is an organization that's headed up by Andrew Choi.
Okay, so that's got a barbed tip.
Yeah, it's got a little barbed tip on it.
Okay.
And so there's two ways to do it. You can either run this cord into the hole of the head and into the spinal column, and it'll run down the cord.
Okay.
Or what I like to do personally is you make a small cut at the tail and break there and go through the cord that way. I find that that's usually.
So you're running this where?
So if you cut a fish's tail, let's say, right? So you're looking at the vertebrae here, and in here is kind of like that jelly. The way that the fish will have on top, there'll be a very small hole, and on the bottom there'll be a very small hole. The hole in the bottom is the artery. That's the bloodline.
Okay.
So you want to stay away from that. On top, though, that's the spinal cord. So the entire spinal cord will run the length of the fish, right? And you use that wire to go up and down that spinal cord, and that kills all of the nerves in there.
Wow.
So what that's going to do is that's going to prevent rigor mortis from setting in immediately. So you're going to have a fish that's pre-rigor that's not going to necessarily get, super stiff right away. But after it comes, because it's going to go into rigor eventually, but it's going to come out of that rigor, and you're going to be able to have a fish that 2 or 3 days after you catch it is floppy.
Okay.
Right. So it's actually kind of bizarre if you've always handled fish in the traditional way. They're kind of, they're stuck in the,
bent tail,
that bent. Yeah, exactly. So what this does is it severs all those nerves that are in there. So the fish, now the cells don't even know they're dead. Right. So that whole process of decomposition doesn't start on the boat the minute you kill it. And, it stops you from having all of that lactic acid building up in the fish. That's something that people don't think about.
Yeah.
This fish, after coming up, basically it's like
the adrenaline.
It's like a human running 100-yard sprint and then dunking his head in a bucket of water. Right? It's the same concept. Whereas the fish comes up, it's got all this lactic acid. It just literally fought for its life, and it has all of those negatives that are in the meat. Whereas when it comes up now, it still has the stress of that, but it doesn't have the added stress of being in the box, having that lactic acid buildup, having the time of suffocation that's in there. And the result is you have a significantly better quality of meat that now it can ship. Now you can, now it opens up different possibilities like dry aging fish, which, a lot of people.
Sushi grade, I'm sure, is immensely great better that way too.
Right. So, one of
this like part of the goal of this is just so it doesn't really taste quote unquote fishy, right?
Right. And one of the things that happens with there's two things that you said that are important. The first thing was the sushi grade, right? And that's really essentially a marketing term that people say. All fish are sushi grade if they're handled properly.
Okay.
Now, the thing that makes a fish taste fishy is the bacteria that's in the blood, because all fish produce a certain bacteria, and that's what gives that, quote, fishy taste or odor. By removing the blood that's in the fish, most of that bacteria is gone. So you don't necessarily have that fishy taste anymore, or even that fishy smell. But by processing a fish this way, it opens up to the other possibilities like dry aging. So people always talk about, we have fresh fish, we have fresh this. There's people now that are dry aging tuna for 30 days, 40 days, right? I have a buddy right now who's dry aging an amberjack in his fridge. It's been in there for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And people think in their head, they're like, this fish is probably toxic, right? But it comes out and it's beautiful. And the meat has a different texture to it and has a different savory quality to it. And everything about the meal itself, and going back to the idea of conservation, is I can take one fish and I can do all these different things with it by parsing it out and actually going through fish butchery rather than just simply filleting a fish and discarding a carcass.
Yeah.
Where now I can take a fillet, I can take the collars, I can take the cheeks, I can take the head, split the head, use the meat from the head.
I saw you're cooking grouper skin.
Yeah. I've done that where I'll actually take a grouper, I'll scale it. I have a special scaler so I don't like bruise up the meat really on it, and I'll scale it off, and I will take I like actually scamp, snowy, yellow edge, do it this way. take them into strips, a little bit of batter on them, the little potato starch, put a little bit of panko on them, fry them up, and they're like delicious fish. It's like if you ever had like chicharrones, like it's like that but fish version of it.
So let me ask you this. So like, does this help for kingfish, or is there like no hope for that fish?
No, it helps for every fish.
Yeah,
every single fish. No,
there's a little inside joke here.
Yeah, no, and I get you guys. So all right, so check it out. So
he loves catching kingfish. He just doesn't like eating them.
It happens to the best of us,
Yeah, he smokes it. Yeah.
So a lot of times that'll happen is that folks will prepare fish in the traditional way, like kingfish, amberjack. They'll smoke them, right? But they don't realize that this type of method of actually, ikejime, or closing the fish, as they say, results in a product that is unlike anything you've ever had before.
Right.
So let's say you do get that kingfish and you brain spike it and you bleed it out, and then you put that wire through so it severs all the nerves, and now you have this fish where, now I can age this fish for 10 days in my fridge. I keep it very dry. One of the other things that's very important is that you gut the fish and you take the gills out, as near immediately as possible, because that's a lot where the bacteria will fester in fish. Put some of the paper towels in there and change those paper towels daily, or flip it in there. And the result, like I said before, is just you have this product that it's like, oh my God, what was I doing?
Yeah.
And so last week I was fishing with Andrew Choi. His name is actually spelled Tsui, but it's spelled Choi. And he was showing me that there's no trash fish, there's only trash technique. And for instance, we caught a grunt, right? We was happening to catch a grunt. And he's like, keep the grunt. Because I was about to throw it back, so keep it. And we processed it exactly the same way. We gave it the brain spike, we bled it out, we put the wire down there, and I will kid you not, I had a yellowtail, a mutton, and a grunt, all prepared the same way. Every single person said the grunt was the best one.
Really?
Yeah. It was
over the mutton.
Over the mutton.
Really?
All day long. It was, and we did it in a very traditional Chinese way. We actually steamed each one of them with some green onions and ginger, and then poured some oil on them with some cilantro at the end to kind of finish them off. And my God, it was just unbelievable. And my mind was blown because I had been doing the process for a while, but he's truly a master at this, as well as the whole aspect of fish butchery, which is a concept that we don't really get here. And I think one of the reasons
we'd like to influence it.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I know you and I had in the past, we had discussed, like, oh, we got to do an episode. We got to do a show. You know what I mean? And when you posted up about that,
yeah, I
was like, all right, that's it. I got to get you in here because this is one of the things that I really want to promote. And actually, I almost wanted to lead off with it today, right? But we just started. It's an organic show, so we just started talking about like the fishing and stuff like that. But like, I was highly interested in this because things like this matter. It's influence, right? And it's just almost just like this knowledge that people need to have.
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing, and especially on the conservation aspect, is you don't have to catch 3 or 4 grouper to process a fish in a way where that one grouper that you caught now is going to last you for so much longer. So it's gonna aid in the conservation. It's going to aid in protecting the species that we are always targeting, that we want to have there for people. But it's also going to create a much better product for us. We're also going to have a better food product. So it's a win-win all around, and it's being more conscientious about the animal that you have just taken its life. Right. I think there's, as anglers, as stewards of the environment, I think it's extraordinarily important that people understand that it's not just a murder fest out there. Like, that's not what we're doing. I'm not trying to stack bodies for pictures, but it's about making sure that you've done your job as best as possible to respect the animal that you just killed, that you are processing in the best way that you can, and leads to the best possible result for you and your family or whoever else you're sharing it with to get an absolutely amazing meal that their mind's blown. I just gave you a grunt, and you're just like, your head explodes. Like, I can't believe that this just happened. This is way better than this mutton snapper. And it's pretty cool, So something like that, where going back to what I was saying originally, is if we can get this out there to folks, to especially the commercial fishermen, to sell them, like, look, man, there's other options out there. There's other things that are more viable to you that will make you a better living, that you will, you'll be able to provide for your family better. And we have restaurants, and not just some bullshit restaurants, but we're talking Michelin starred restaurants that are going to come after you for these particular species of fish, because that's what they're going to tailor their menus to. I think it's an absolute knock it out of the park win.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. The second I read what you posted up, that's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah.
I was like, that's money, dude. I mean, not like money, but that's like solid stuff right there.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. And tying this back into the slow pitch is just, it's just taking that one more step to just stop and think about what you're doing.
Right.
Just to have that appreciation for it, take it one step deeper. Anytime I talk to somebody that's really passionate about what they do and just learning about what they do, like I could probably talk to you about painting, and I don't know anything about painting, but you could probably tell me a whole lot, and you can tell me why I chose this hue,
100%.
why, exactly, right? All that stuff. And it's so fascinating to me to hear people that have that passion about it and to be able to share that, and then to have that thing go off in your head. Oh, that makes sense.
That's why I love doing other people's podcasts sometimes, right? Because then that allows me the time to open up about that kind of stuff. Because when I'm bringing people on, we're talking about the stuff that they do, the stuff that they're into, and occasionally we'll touch on some of this stuff, and some of the guests will ask me, hey, they'll counter questions for me and stuff like that. It's cool. Right? But in a long format, when like I'm being interviewed, I like it because it's cathartic. It allows me to like open up about some of those things, and but it's cool. Man, Benny, I could sit here and talk to you forever. Unfortunately, today we are out of time, but
all right,
dude, I want to have you back on the show.
I'd love to.
Yeah, I mean, you're right down the street too, so it's a
down
no-brainer.
The street, man.
Yeah, and because there's actually topics I want to get even deeper into with you, and if with your permission, I want to go ahead and open up the whole the fish closing.
Yeah, Ikejime.
I want to open that up as an ongoing topic on the show.
For sure.
I'll point them in your direction for any questions or anything like that, but I'm going to keep bringing it up because I want to promote this because I think it's really important. The quality and the value and the pride in the hunt and all that. It's really important. From a, I don't know if you want to call it an ethical standpoint, but just from a intrinsic standpoint,
right?
If you will.
Yeah, it's both. It's not just the ethical standpoint of, like I said, of taking care of what the animal that you just you harvested, but just having the best possible product.
Yeah.
Like if you can have a grouper that comes up and it's processed the traditional way versus a grouper that's processed this way, and I put them on the same plate, you're gonna pick one. I know you're gonna pick one. Every single time. So why not do it? Yeah. It just makes sense. But
I'm going to have Yanni's going to be like, all right, I caught this kingfish. I'm going to shove this wire up his ass. Where do I put it?
It's just north of the ass. That's where you got to go.
All right. Listen, you guys can find him on Instagram at Mr. Benny Ortiz, right? He is master angler. He is the pioneer of slow pitch jig and just an all-around, waterman and outdoorsman. And, we really appreciate you coming on the show today. Do we have any church announcements to make here? We got your seminar coming up. But and just stay tuned, to follow him because he's really got a lot of great things to share. Are we good? We have it? The what? I got the sponsors, but I just want to make sure there wasn't anything. The Starbrite thing. Listen, again, we need your nominees for the Starbrite Solutions coastal cleanup program that we're doing. It's really, really important. Tag at Sea Red Wine. Tag at starbrite_com, tag at Connected by Water, tag at Dennis Friel Art. You don't have to tag them all. You just really have to tag one of them. The message will be heard to make your nominations clear. All right. So I want to thank our sponsors, Joey Cardi, Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram. If you're in the market for a new truck or vehicle, give them a call. Price, service, and selection is outstanding. Our good friends at Papa's PLR Rum, our family at Papa's PLR Rum, who
shout out to Papa's PLR.
100%. And we had Mike call us today, and it's always nice to hear from Sir Myatt and all those guys, and we really love being part of that fraternity. There you are, keeping the Hemingway tradition alive. We want to thank our buddies over at Papa's Raw Bar. We remind you to eat, drink, and be local. Go ahead and download their app to get connected to your local community. Right? And happy, well, you can't say happy Memorial Day because Memorial Day is what it is. So I hope everyone enjoyed their Memorial Day weekend, their day off, and do not ever forget why you have that day off. Right? So we're going to sign off. Your ego is not your amigo. And always do your best. And at the end of the day, just let God do the rest. And do not ever forget, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we're all connected by water. Thank you, Benny.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.
Cheers.